On Oblivion by Morian Zenus.
It is improper, however customary, to refer to the denizens of the dimension of Oblivion as demons. This practice probably dates back to the Eleshian doctrines of the First Era prophet Maruk, which rather amusingly forbade traffic with daemons and then neglected to explain what daemons were. It is most probable that daemon is a misspelling or etymological rendition of Daedra, the old elven word for those strange, powerful creatures of uncertain motivation who hail from the dimension of Oblivion. Daedra is actually the plural form. The singular is Daedroth. In a later tract by King Hael the Pious of Skyrim, almost 1,000 years after the publication of the original doctrines, the evil machinations of his political enemies are compared to the wickedness of the demons of Oblivion. Their depravity equals that of Sanguine itself. They are cruel as Boethia, calculating as Molag Bal, and mad as Sheogorath. Hael the Pious thus long-windedly introduced 4 of the Daedra Lords to written record. But the written record is not, after all, the best way to research Oblivion and the Daedra who inhabit it. Those who traffic with daemons seldom wish it to be a matter of public account. Nevertheless, scattered throughout the literature of the First Era are diaries, journals, notices for witch burnings, and guides for Daedra slayers. These I have used as my primary source material. They are at least as trustworthy as the Daedra Lords I have actually summoned and spoken with at length. Apparently, Oblivion is a place composed of many lands. Thus, the many names for which Oblivion is synonymous: Cold Harbor, Quagmire, Moonshadow, etc. It may be correctly supposed that each land of Oblivion is ruled over by one prince. The Daedra princes whose names appear over and over in ancient records, though this is not an infallible test of their authenticity or explicit existence, to be sure, are the aforementioned Sanguine, Boethia, Molag Bal, and Sheogorath. In addition, Azura, Mephala, Clavicus Vile, Vermina, Malakath, Hermaeus or Hermias or Hermias or Herma. There seems to be no accepted spelling: Mora, Namira, Jigalag, Nocturnal, Mehrunes Dagon, and Periite. From my experience, Daedra are a very mixed lot. It is almost impossible to categorize them as a whole except for their immense power and penchant for extremism. Be that as it may, I have here attempted to do so in a few cases, purely for the sake of scholastic expediency. Mehrunes Dagon, Molag Bal, Periite, Boethia, and Vermina are among the most consistently demonic of the Daedra, in the sense that their spheres seem to be destructive in nature. The other Daedra can, of course, be equally dangerous, but seldom purely for the sake of destruction as these 5 can. Nor are these previous 5 identical in their destructiveness. Mehrunes Dagon seems to prefer natural disasters, earthquakes and volcanoes for venting his anger. Molag Bal elects the employment of other Daedra, and Boethia inspires the arms of mortal warriors. Periite's sphere seems to Periite's sphere seems to be pestilence, and Vermina's torture. In preparation for the next installment in this series, I will be investigating two matters that have intrigued me since I began my career as a Daedra Researcher. The first is on one particular Daedroth, perhaps yet another Daedric prince, referred to in multiple articles of Incunabula as Hircine. Hircine has been called the huntsman of the princes and the father of man-beasts, but I have yet to find anyone who can summon him. The other, and perhaps more doubtful goal I have, is to find a practical means for mortal men to pass through to Oblivion. It has always been my philosophy that we need only fear that which we do not understand. And with that thought in mind, I ever pursue my objective.
The Doors of Oblivion. When thou enterest into Oblivion, Oblivion entereth into thee. The greatest mage who ever lived was my master, Morian Zenus. You have heard of him as the author of the book on Oblivion, the standard text for all matters Daedric. Despite many entreaties over the years, he refused to update his classic book with his new discoveries and theories, because he found that the more one delves into these realms, the less certain one is. He did not want conjecture, he wanted facts. For decades before and after the publication of On Oblivion, Zenus compiled a vast personal library on the subject of Oblivion, the home of the Daedra. He divided his time between this research and personal magical growth on the assumption that should he succeed in finding a way into the dangerous world beyond and behind ours, he would need much power to wander its dark paths. 12 years before Zenus began the journey he had prepared his whole life to make, he hired me as his assistant. I possessed the 3 attributes he required for the position. I was young and eager to help without question. I could read any book once and memorize its contents. And despite my youth, I was already a master of conjuration. Zenus too was a master of conjuration, indeed a master at all the known and unknown schools. But he did not want to rely on his ability alone in the most perilous of his research. In an underground vault, he summoned Daedra to interview them on their native land, and for that he needed another conjurer to make certain they came, were bound, and were sent away again without incident. I will never forget that vault, not for its look, which was plain and unadorned, but for what you couldn't see. There were scents that lingered long after the summoned creatures had left. Flowers and sulfur, sex and decay, power and madness. They haunt me still to this very day. Conjuration, for the layman unacquainted with its workings, connects the caster's mind with that of the summoned. It is a tenuous link meant only to lure, hold, and dismiss, but in the hands of a master it can be much stronger. The Psijics and Dwemer can, or in the case of the Dwemer, I should say could, connect with the minds of others and converse miles apart, a skill that is sometimes called telepathy. Over the course of my employment, Zenus and I developed such a link between one another. It was accidental, a result of 2 powerful conjurers working closely together, but we decided that it could be invaluable should he succeed in traveling to Oblivion. Since the denizens of that land could be touched even by the skills of an amateur conjurer, it was possible we could continue to communicate while he was there, so I could record his discoveries. The doors to Oblivion, to use Morian Zenus's phrase, are not easily found, and we exhausted many possibilities before we found one where we held the key. The Psijics of Artaeum have a place they call the Dreaming Cave, where it is said one can enter into the Daedric realms and return. Iacasis, Sothosil, Nemetia, and many others have been recorded as using this means, but despite many entreaties to the Order, we were denied its use. Solaris, the leader of the Order, has told us it has been sealed off for the safety of all. We had hopes of using the ruins of the battle spire to access Oblivion. The Weir Gate still stands, though the old proving grounds of the Imperial Battle Mages itself was shattered some years ago in Jaeger Tharn's time. Sadly, after an exhaustive search through the detritus, we had to conclude that it was destroyed. All access to the realms beyond, the Soul Cairn, the Shade Perilous, and the Havoc Wellhead had been broken. It was probably for the good, but it frustrated our goal. The reader may have heard of other doors, and he may be assured we attempted to find them all. Some are pure legend, or at any rate not traceable based on the information left behind. There are references in lore to Maruk's Abyss, the Corrington Mirror, the Mantellan Crux, the Crossroads, the Mouth, a riddle of an alchemical formula called Jacinth and Rising Sun, and many other places and objects that are said to be doors, but we could not find them. Some exist but cannot be entered safely. The whirlpool in the Abyssian, called the Maelstrom of Baal, can make ships disappear and may be a portal into Oblivion, but the trauma of riding its waters would surely slay any who tried. Likewise, we did not consider it worth the risk to leap from the Pillar of Thras, a 1,000-foot tall spiral of coral, though we witnessed the sacrifices the Slodes made there. Some victims were killed by the fall, but some indeed seemed to vanish before being dashed on the rocks. Since the Slode did not seem certain why some were taken and some died, we did not favor the odds of the plunge. The simplest and most maddeningly complex way to go to Oblivion was simply to cease to be here and begin to be there. Throughout history, there are examples of mages who seemed to travel the realms beyond ours seemingly at will. Many of these voyagers are long dead if they ever existed at all, but we were able to find one still living. In a tower off Zephyrbal Bay in the island of Vardenfell in the province of Morrowind, there exists a very old, very reclusive wizard named Dvaith. He was not easy to reach, and he was reluctant to share with Morian Zenus the secret door to Oblivion. Fortunately, my master's knowledge of lore impressed Fear, and he taught him the way. I would be breaking my promise to Zenus and Fear to explain the procedure here, and I would not divulge it if I could. If there is dangerous knowledge to be had, that is it. But I do not reveal too much to say that Fear's scheme relied on exploiting a series of portals to various realms created by a Telvanni wizard, long missing and presumed dead. Against the disadvantage of this limited number of access points, we weighed the relative liability and security of passage, and considered ourselves fortunate in our informant. Morian Zenus then left this world to begin his exploration. I stayed at the library to transcribe his information and help him with any research he needed.
Dust,
he whispered to me on the first day of his voyage. Despite the inherent dreariness of the word, I could hear his excitement in his voice, echoing in my mind.
I can see from one end of the world to the other in a million shades of gray. There is no sky or ground or air, only particles floating, falling, whirling about me. I must levitate and breathe by magical means.
Zenus explored the nebulous land for some time, encountering vaporous creatures and palaces of smoke. Though he never met the prince, he concluded that he was in Ashpit, said to be the home of Malakath, where anguish, betrayal, and broken promises like ash filled the bitter air.
The sky is on fire,
I heard him say as he moved on to the next realm.
The ground is sludge but traversable. I see blackened ruins all around me like a war was fought here in the distant past. The air is freezing. I cast glooms of warmth all around me, but it still feels like daggers of ice stabbing me in all directions.
This was Cold Harbor, where Molag Bal was prince. It appeared to Zenus as if it were a future Nirn under the King of Rape, desolate and barren, filled with suffering. I could hear Morian Zenus weep at the images he saw, and shiver at the sight of the imperial palace spattered with blood and excrement.
Too much beauty,
Zenus gasped when he went to the next realm.
I am half blind. I see flowers and waterfalls, majestic trees, a city of silver, but it is all a blur. The colors run like water. It's raining now and the wind smells like perfume. This surely is Moonshadow, where Azura dwells.
Zenus was right, and astonishingly, he even had audience with the Queen of Dusk and Dawn in her Rose Palace. She listened to his tale with a smile, and told him of the coming of the Nerevarine. My master found Moonshadow so lovely he wished to stay there, half-blind forever. But he knew he must move on and complete his journey of discovery.
I am in a storm,
he told me as he entered the next realm. He described the landscape of dark, twisted trees, howling spirits, and billowing mist, and I thought he might have entered the deadlands of Mehrunes Dagon. But then he said quickly,
No, I am no longer in a forest. There was a flash of lightning, and now I'm on a ship. The mast is tattered, the crew is slaughtered. Something is coming through the waves. Oh gods, wait. Now I'm in a dank dungeon, in a cell.
He was not in the Deadlands, but Quagmire, the nightmare realm of Vermina. Every few minutes there was a flash of lightning and reality shifted, always to something more horrible and horrifying. A dark castle one moment, a den of ravening beasts the next. A moonlit swamp, a coffin where he was buried alive. Fear got the better of my master, and he quickly passed to the next realm. I heard him laugh.
I feel like I'm home now.
Morian Zenus described to me an endless library, shelves stretching on in every direction, stacks on top of stacks. Pages floated on a mystical wind that he could not feel. Every book had a black cover with no title. He could see no one, but felt the presence of ghosts moving through the stacks, rifling through the books, ever searching. It was Apocrypha, the home of Hermaeus Mora, where all forbidden knowledge can be found. I felt a shudder in my mind, but I could not tell if it was my master's or mine. Morian Zenus never traveled to another realm that I know of. Throughout his visits to the first 4 realms, my master spoke to me constantly. Upon entering the Apocrypha, he became quieter as he was lured into the world of research and study, the passions that had controlled his heart while he was on Nirn. I would frantically try to call him, but he closed his mind to me. Then he would whisper,
This cannot be. No one would ever guess the truth. I must learn more. I see the world, a last illusion's shimmer. It is crumbling all around us.
I would cry back to him, begging him to tell me what was happening, what he was seeing, what he was learning. I even tried using conjuration to summon him as if he were a Daedra himself, but he refused to leave. Morian Zenus was lost. I last received a whisper from him 6 months ago. Before then, it had been 5 years, and 3 before that. His thoughts are no longer intelligible in any language. Perhaps he is still in Apocrypha, lost but happy, in a trap he refuses to escape. Perhaps he slipped between the stacks and passed into the madhouse of Sheogorath, losing his sanity forever. I would save him if I could. I would silence his whispers if I could.